stories.
Your freedom.
The Peter Schiff Show.
Hello, everybody. This is Peter Schiff here at the Peter Schiff Show at SchiffRadio.com. Got a great show for you today, so stick around at the half hour. We've got a special guest, Senator Rand Paul, is dropping by to talk about his new plan for jobs in America. We also have another Republican candidate for U.S. Congress that's going to stop by at the top of the second hour. Meantime, we're going to be taking your calls, 855-4-SCHIFF, and talking about some of the economic news that came out earlier this morning, as well as discussion of the Republican presidential debates from last night on CNN in Las Vegas, Nevada. First of all, I want to get to some of the economic news that came out earlier this morning. The CPI was released. Remember, we had a big jump in the PPI, the Producer Price Index, yesterday. CPI came out today, and when I'm scanning the Internet for some stories on the CPI, I pulled up a Wall Street Journal story. The headline of this story is Underlying Inflation Tame. Oh, underlying inflation is tame. We must have had a pretty good CPI number this morning. The CPI for the month of September was up 0.3% for the month. And if you go back over the last 12 months to get the trailing number, how much are prices up from where they were 1 year ago, it's 3.9%. That is the fastest inflation, or the highest inflation in the United States year over year in more than 3 years. That's pretty bad news on inflation. I mean, that doesn't show tame inflation. Why isn't the Wall Street Journal headline, inflation the highest in 3 years? Inflation almost 4%. Remember, when it got to 4% under Richard Nixon, it was so bad, we imposed wage and price controls. Now, we've got virtually an identical inflation rate. Of course, it's actually much higher because we don't calculate it the way we used to. But it's the same number that's being reported, and the Wall Street Journal says underlying inflation is tame. So I'm thinking, what are they talking about? What underlying inflation are they talking about? Well, they're talking about the core. The core rate was up just 0.1%. And annualized, it's up 2%. So when they're saying the underlying inflation rate, they're talking about the core rate. Well, who cares about that? Who cares what's happening underneath? I mean, the underlying inflation rate means underlying the actual inflation rate, which is 3.9%. So the whole title of the article is misleading. And the problem is inflation is getting worse as the economy is getting worse. The economy is getting weaker, and we've got more inflation. That is a big story. Now, of course, the Federal Reserve, they're out there downplaying this. They're saying, well, you know, the inflation is going to come down in the future. Based on what? I mean, based on hope? You know, is that the strategy? We hope inflation comes down. Why should it come down? In fact, if you look at what's happened to crude oil prices, which are now about $89 a barrel, oil prices in October, right? These are the September CPI numbers. So since September ended, in the last couple of weeks of October, oil prices are up by 12% already. 12%. Now, this is not gas price. This is oil price. But obviously, if oil prices are going up, gasoline prices are going to go up. This does not bode well for future months of CPI to come down. If anything, you would see more upward pressure on inflation, not downward pressure. Yet the media and the Fed continue to try to pretend that there's no inflation. You know, talk also about the media spin and how people pretend. There were housing starts that came out today. When I first heard this described on CNBC, they basically reported that housing starts are up 15%. Good news. And I'm reading a Bloomberg story again. Headline, housing starts rose more than 15%, more than forecast. People think, oh, good news, we're building more houses. Although I don't think that would be good news because the last thing we need is more houses. But if you actually look beneath the surface, why did we have a 15% increase in construction? Well, single-family homes, which, of course, is what most people think about when you talk about housing construction, there the increase was only 1.7%. There was only a 1.7% increase in construction of single-family homes. Well, then how is it that we had a 15% increase in construction? Well, it's because we had a 51.3% surge in multifamily home construction, townhomes, apartments. Well, the reason for that is because the housing market is so weak that despite all these open vacant houses, nobody wants to buy them. People want to rent. And so people are building rental units because that's how weak the housing market is. Now, it would be better if more of these homes that were for sale were for rent, but a lot of them aren't for rent because they're tied up in the foreclosure process, which is being slowed down by the government. And a lot of them are just sitting there vacant. So rather than renting these houses out, we're constructing multifamily units that we probably don't need. We should use the resources for something else. Or, of course, if we simply let housing prices fall, then a lot of the houses that are now on the market and sitting vacant, the price would fall low enough so that the people who are now trying to rent would be able to buy. But because we're keeping real estate prices artificially propped up, the houses sit empty, and now we're using our resources to build new rental units when we can simply allow the prices of the houses we've already built to come down. So rather than having to use our resources to build more apartments, we could use it maybe to make some factories, to produce some stuff, to really grow the economy. But again, this is more distortion, how the government comes in, interferes, and causes society to use its resources in a less than optimal way to be producing all these new homes when we've got record numbers of vacant, unoccupied housing units sitting there on the market. But again, of course, the media initial announcement of this news, hey, we got better news on the housing market because of new construction. They're not constructing houses. They're constructing apartment buildings. Anyway, one more piece of news I want to get to before I go to the phones. Again, it's 855-4SCHIFF, 855-4SCHIFF. I see that there are open lines, although maybe that's not the case. I'm going to try reloading my program. Sometimes this happens to me and I can't see the calls. But one more bit of news that I'm looking at. Silicon Valley used to be, or San Jose rather, used to be the wealthiest metropolitan area in the United States because San Jose, California included Silicon Valley. That's the home of all the high-tech entrepreneurs. And hey, I've got no problem with that. I think that's good that, the people that are coming up with all these new companies and new ideas are getting rich in the process. That's great. Well, the new news that just came out today now is that San Jose is no longer the wealthiest American county. Well, I wonder what county has taken its place. Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is now the number one wealthiest county, metropolitan area in the United States with a median income of $126,000. Where'd all that money come from? What are they inventing in Washington? Nothing. Who's benefiting from that work? Nobody. It's because all this money is going to Washington. They're jacking up all the federal salaries. All the lawyers, all the lobbyists are making a fortune, bleeding the country dry. The more money Washington makes, the poorer the rest of the country gets. Anyway, we will be back. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. Stick around. I'm back on the air. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com, and I want to spend this segment talking about the Republican debates from last night. If anybody wants to call in and discuss that topic, give us a call, 855-4SCHIFF. My impression, first of all, right off the bat, everybody came out guns firing at Herman Cain with his 999 plan, and not a single opponent actually criticized the plan for the right reasons. In fact, most of the criticism showed a complete lack of understanding of economics on the part of his opponents. Most of the criticism on the Herman Cain plan was because it imposed a national sales tax on top of the existing sales taxes that already existed. Well, so what? I mean, what difference does that make? I mean, first of all, right now, most people pay two income taxes. Most states have a state income tax, so people are paying a federal income tax and a state income tax. So how is that different than paying a state sales tax and a federal sales tax? The fact of the matter is, if the imposition of a federal sales tax comes with the abolishment of the payroll tax and a big reduction in the income tax, then what difference does it make? In fact, it's actually a more efficient, less obtrusive way for the government to raise taxes. It's better if we're taxed as we spend our money rather than as we earn our money. So all of this criticism that was being leveled on 999 was wrong. I mean, yes, there is a problem with the 999, but not one person on that panel in that debate identified the actual problem. The actual problem is that it's not a 999 plan. It's a 9999 plan. The problem is the fourth nine, and it's only a problem in that it means that most Americans are going to have to pay higher taxes. But here is what nobody wants to acknowledge. If we really want a pro-growth tax structure, if we want the economy to grow and we want a lot of jobs, we have to lower taxes on the people who produce those jobs. We have to lower taxes on capital so we can have more private sector investment and we can have more economic growth and more jobs. And the only way we can lower taxes on wealthier taxpayers, which, as it happens, are the ones that are doing the investing and creating the jobs, if we want to do that, if we want to lower taxes on people who make more money, the only way to do that is to raise taxes on people who make less money. Now, I don't want to do that. I don't want to raise taxes on the people that make less money, but I do want to lower the taxes on people who make more money. And the way you do that is to slash government spending. That's the only way to make that possible. You see, what the liberals don't want people to know is that the only way that we can have a growing economy and still have a huge government is to make the middle class pay for it with higher taxes. If we want a growing economy and jobs, then we only can do that if we raise taxes on the middle class, unless we want to cut government spending. Those are the choices. See, the liberals want to pretend that we can have a growing economy, have all these government programs, and just put the bill of all those government programs on the rich. Well, it doesn't work, because when you tax the people pulling the cart, it doesn't move as fast. You tax them enough, it doesn't move at all. You know, that is the problem. I wish we would have seen a greater understanding of economics demonstrated by guys like Mitt Romney, or who still can't grasp the real problem with this plan. Because if it really was a 999 plan, if there was no hidden payroll tax, and this plan really did only impose three taxes: a corporate income tax of 9%, a national sales tax of 9%, and an income tax of 9%. If it actually did that, and it did it in a revenue neutral way, every candidate should be all over this plan. They should love it. The reason it doesn't work is because it's only revenue neutral because of the fourth nine. And when Herman Cain is out there saying, hey, add it up, he's telling voters to add up the nines and see for yourself. Of course, if they add up the nines, most Americans are going to see a tax reduction because they don't know about that fourth nine. But if they knew about that fourth nine and then they added that, then most Americans doing the math would see they get a tax hike and not a tax cut. You know, one of the other things about this debate, I thought it was a little bit more enjoyable to watch, only because they were all arguing over almost nothing, which was kind of entertaining. What they were arguing about whether or not Mitt Romney employed an illegal alien to mow his lawn. But I thought the most interesting answer that slipped out, and so no one's really talking about this, but when Rick Perry accused Mitt Romney of being a hypocrite on immigration because he had somebody cutting his lawn who was an illegal alien. And at one point, I thought these guys were going to hit each other. You had Mitt Romney put his hand on Rick Perry, and I don't know, their eyes looked like they were ready to come to blows. But when he accused him of this, as Romney was denying that he hired any illegal aliens, he actually said this, and I could almost fell off the couch when he said this. I couldn't believe a politician would actually say this. He said that, hey, when he found out that the gardener service that he hired was using illegal immigrants, his response was, hey, I'm running for president. I can't have any illegal workers on my property, so get rid of them. Now, he admitted that. So his response wasn't, this is against the law, this is terrible. I don't want any illegal immigrants. He said that because he's running for president, he doesn't want any illegal immigrants working on his property, meaning that if he wasn't running for president, if it wasn't going to be a political problem, hey, he doesn't care. He has no problem hiring illegal immigrants. He only has a problem with how it looks politically since he's running for president. Now, I think that is a very, very big admission that could be played up. I don't know. No one else has picked up on it yet. I haven't heard anybody in the media talking about it. But I think that's big. Now, of course, I think the whole thing, so many people have illegal immigrants working for them in those kind of jobs. I mean, take the state of California. I mean, almost everybody that's doing the child care, watching people's kids, are illegal immigrants. Get rid of all those illegal immigrants. A lot of people in California aren't going to be able to afford to go to work because they're not going to be able to afford to hire somebody to watch their kids. And the same thing, all the lawns out there in California. What percentage of the people that are cutting lawns and watering lawns are illegal? Probably not that many. And what would happen if people had to hire legal workers? I mean, they're not there. The wages would have to go up so much that a lot of people in California would have to cut the grass all by themselves. I'm not really sure when they would do it. There's a lot of people are too busy working a couple of jobs. Now, maybe those that are unemployed, maybe they can cut their own grass. But all this thing is hypocritical to pretend that people are not going to hire the illegals. There's so many people that do it. And, of course, the problem is all these politicians want to pin all the responsibility on the employers. Hey, let's crack down on the employers who hire illegal immigrants. Well, what does that mean? That means that we have to impose new costs and obligations on employers who now have to act as immigration agents, who now have to screen all their employees, potential employees, and make sure they're here legally. All of this stuff has a cost to employers. And the more things we want to throw on our employers, the more costs that we want to put on businesses, the fewer people they're going to hire. That is just the bottom line. So if we really want to do something on immigration, we need to do it not from the employers, but out of general tax revenue. Just sticking this mandate on the employer just runs up the cost of employing people doing business and diminishes economic growth and employment opportunities. Anyway, we've got Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul, stopping by next. So stick around. We'll be right back on the Peter Schiff Show.
The Peter Schiff Show.
IRN, USA Radio News. I'm Mark Thomas. There's a hopeful sign for the housing market. Homes were built in September at the fastest pace in 17 months. The Commerce Department says builders began work on a seasonally adjusted 658,000 homes last month, the most since April of last year. Herman Cain's 999 economic plan caught flack from his Republican rivals last night during the latest GOP presidential debate in Las Vegas. But Cain stuck up for his plan despite claims it would amount to a tax hike on 84% of American households. A new study says venture capitalists' investments declined in the third quarter compared to the second, but it's still more than last year. A study out today says startup investments rose 31% in the July through September period from a year earlier. Compared with the second quarter of this year, venture capital investments declined 12%. This is IRN, USA Radio News.
Hi, this is Ed Krell, Chief Executive Officer of Destination Maternity. It's a sad fact that each year, thousands of babies here at home and millions more worldwide are born too soon. The problem is big, but that shouldn't stop us. Together with the March of Dimes, we're helping moms in our community get the care they need to have full-term pregnancies and healthy babies. Help us raise awareness of this crisis and put an end to premature birth for good. Learn and do more at marchofdimes.com.
Everyone has heard about the powerful health benefits of eating 9 to 11 servings of fruits and vegetables daily. Science has confirmed the miraculous power of Mother Nature's ability to boost the immune system by over 700%. dramatically protecting and improving one's health through concentrated nutrition. But buying, storing, preparing, and eating 9 to 11 servings of fruits and vegetables every day seems impossible. Balance of Nature is leading the nutrition revolution by solving this problem, providing an easy and affordable way to consume over 10 servings of 31 different pure fruits and veggies every day, maintaining 99.9% of its nutritional value, all for about 17 cents per serving. Compare that to $1 at the market. Call 888-491-2217. That's 888-491-2217. Or go online at balanceofnature.com and use promo code HEALTH. balanceofnature.com.
Wearing glasses with Crizal lenses can make a big difference in your vision. Because neither rain, nor snow, nor dust and dirt, nor smudges, or even the toughest scratches, nor the glare of oncoming traffic can keep your lenses from giving you the clearest vision possible. Crizal lenses. Live life in the clear. That's C-R-I-Z-A-L. Crizal. Ask for them at your eye care professional.
We now return to the Peter Schiff Show. Call in now, 855-4-SCHIFF. That's 855-472-4433. Real Radio, the Peter Schiff Show.
This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. Joining me now is Senator Rand Paul, who is the co-sponsor of the brand new Jobs Through Growth Act, which is an alternative to the president's plan, which did not make it through the Senate. Of course, the president's plan was an example of the truth in advertising, because his plan, maybe it had the word jobs in the title, but there was no jobs in the plan. I think Rand Paul's plan is a little bit different, because Rand understands that what's really standing in the way of Americans and jobs is the U.S. government. And I think Rand's plan is trying to tear down some of those barriers. Anyway, Senator, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, Peter.
So tell me a little bit about your genuine jobs plan rather than the president's phony jobs plan that I guess you helped lead the charge to vote down.
Well, we got kind of tired of hearing the president going all over the country saying, pass it, pass it, pass it now. And we just don't think that's a great strategy. There's been a Republican jobs plan for about 8 months, and so what we did is took most aspects of that plan and put it into a bill. And our bill really has a different vision. Our bill believes that real jobs come from economic growth and from the private sector. So what we've done is 3 different things. We've tried to reform the tax code to make the rates lower and to simplify the tax codes. And there's good historic evidence that when you lower rates, you can get economic growth. Kennedy did it, and also Reagan did it. And you had significant economic growth, and you had significant reduction in unemployment when you lowered tax rates.
So how much lower are you making the rates?
Well, it's never quite low enough, but we are making the rates lower where you'd have basically a two-tiered system of 25 and 10 with fewer deductions. Ideally, I think we ought to have a flatter rate and a lower rate than that, and I'm also going to be proposing a flat tax sometime in the future, but this is what we could get everybody or the majority of the Republicans to agree to for now. We also have a regulatory moratorium. We also require that regulations be voted on and passed by Congress. We also open up energy production in our country, open up the continental shelf for drilling, open up mining of coal, and make it easier for energy production in our country.
Yeah, I think a moratorium would have been a great idea about 10 years ago. The problem is we need relief from the regulations that still are in place. Are you going to repeal some of the regulations that already exist? Because I don't think a moratorium is enough at this point.
You're right, and I've actually proposed that we repeal one a week until unemployment declines or economic growth returns. We also are using another tool. There's something called the Congressional Review Act, which allows for expedited review of regulations, and we have 2 of them pending right now. One is on net neutrality, and one is on clean air transport, and we are going to force votes on these. We get an expedited vote in the Senate, and it requires an up or down vote with a simple majority being able to get rid of regulations. So we are trying to get rid of regulations as well.
And what specifically on simplicity? We're bringing down the rates, but how are we making the tax process simpler?
Well, I think it's by having less deductions in the tax code and making it more of a simple rate. All of the answers aren't outlined in the proposal simply because we have to go through I don't think you ever are going to get tax reform in a big omnibus kind of bill fashion like this. We're going to have to go through the committee process. I don't think this debt ceiling commission is going to come up with significant tax reform or entitlement reform. In fact, I think
you're bringing down the rates then more in a revenue neutral manner by getting rid of some of the deductions.
That's what the goal is, and the way the language in the legislation is. It's not ideal in the sense that I would rather actually reduce revenue rather than just transferring around who's paying the revenue. But as a first step towards trying to induce and get the economy growing again, I think lower rates and a simpler tax code would be helpful.
Well, it's definitely a step in the right direction. I think you understand, too, more importantly, that genuine tax relief only comes with spending reductions. Because right now, if we want to pretend that we can cut people's taxes but just put the difference on a credit card, it actually ends up costing more money when you borrow to pay for it than when you tax to pay.
And that's why we've been looking at, in my office, a flat tax. And when we do, almost all of the models come up with less revenue for government, which is fine with me. What I would do, though, is simply offset those with spending reductions. And I think that's the way we should be looking at revenue neutral. Not that we make them revenue neutral by increasing one guy's taxes while we reduce another guy's, but making them revenue neutral by cutting spending and cutting taxes.
You know, your father, Ron Paul, he just announced the other day his new plan, which he's now the first presidential candidate that doesn't want to just talk about cutting government spending. He's actually laid out a plan to cut government spending. Did you have any input into that, and what do you feel about your dad's plan?
You know, I'm all in favor of it. I can't claim authorship, though. I think he's one-upped me, actually, because we had a bill that would have cut $500 billion in 1 year. Now he's gone and upstaged me with $1 trillion in 1 year.
Well, now it's your turn. Let's have a battle. Which Paul can cut the most?
Yeah, no, but I'm proud of him for the plan, and it actually would balance the budget within about a 3-year period. That actually upstages me, too, because I had a 5-year plan. But, no, I'm all for it. I'm very supportive of everything he's trying to do with that. And really, I think it's the only kind of plan that you could ever believe is if you plan and promise to do something during your term of office.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Usually a guy running for president promises a balanced budget like in year 5. So you can't hold him accountable during his actual term.
They never get there. Nowadays, we've started talking about the budget instead of in 1- and 2-year cycles where we might be able to predict what's going on. Now we're talking about in 10-year cycles, and nobody's in office in 10 years. I mean, I bet you 50% of us are gone in 10 years.
Well, and of course, you know, what's so funny about it is they can't even get the projections right a year in advance. They have no idea what the growth rates are going to be, what the tax revenues are going to be, what the interest rates are going to be, or inflation. They're just guessing. And the further out into the future you're guessing, the less likely it is you're going to be accurate.
Well, and the other thing that even complicates it further is that not only are you guessing on what's going to come in or what's going to be spent, you're also working against a baseline that increases by about 7% a year. So the interesting thing is that if we froze spending, right now we froze spending and didn't spend any more than we are spending currently for 10 years, you might balance the budget, but the CBO would score that as a $9 billion cut.
Yeah. And the problem is we've got a ticking time bomb here in the debt and our exposure to interest rates. And, you know, we can have a sovereign debt crisis at any moment. And so, you know, I know you and your dad are working to try to defuse this bomb, but the risk is it goes off before you have a chance to do it.
Right. And that's why you really have to look at every aspect of spending. Entitlements are about 55 to 60% of the budget. If we're not willing to address those, we're not getting anywhere. All the discretionary spending, even if we cut all of it, doesn't even balance the budget. So really we have to be bigger, bolder, and start talking about solutions to the entire budget. And I think time is running short. I think the contagion in Europe is very much in danger of spreading here.
Yeah, I know even your dad took a punt on the entitlement issues in his most recent plan. But reality is if we can't get this plan passed, I mean, we probably have no hope at dealing with some of these bigger issues. We got to at least get the ball moving down the field. And we're doing that with his plan, and certainly I think your jobs plan is a major improvement, because I'm reading through some of it, and at least the focus is on getting rid of some of these regulations and taxes, and understanding that is the reason that jobs aren't being created. The biggest obstacle in the path of the employer is the government, and you've got President Obama saying the way we create jobs is to take money away from the job creators and send it to Washington. That's how we destroy jobs.
Well, we've allowed a government to become so large and so invasive and so much the bully. We had just last week, I invited the CEO of Gibson Guitar to Washington, and I had a hearing, and we heard about what the government's doing to him, and it is just outrageous. He employs 2,600 Americans, and he imports wood from India and Madagascar. They're accusing him of breaking a law, not an American law, but an Indian labor law, that says the wood needs to be finished in India.
Oh, I know, it's a travesty. I had him on my show. And, it's just an example of the government's war on jobs, where, Obama is the job killer in chief. They're wondering why all the jobs are disappearing. We are vilifying employers. We are loading them up with taxes and regulations, and then we expect them to create jobs.
Yeah, and not only that, then it's the rhetoric of the president as he roams around the country inflaming the mob and saying, go and get yours from the rich people. I'll get it from them. They don't deserve to have 3 cars. You deserve to have a nicer car and a bigger house, and I'm going to take it from these people who have too much money and it was ill-gotten. And really what I worry about that rhetoric is that in the beginning maybe people will say, well, I'll just wait and let government take it from the rich people. But what really stops us from the next step where people say, well, gosh, I've got a brick here. I could just go throw it through the window and get what's mine now. Why do I need to wait for government? So really the emotions of envy in this class warfare are unseemly, and I think ultimately can even be a precursor to, sort of mobs getting out of control.
Oh, I agree. I think some of these, Occupy Wall Street protests are going to get violent as the situation gets worse and worse. And the irony of it is, it's the government that is making it worse. You have all these people who are occupying Wall Street. They ought to be up in Washington, D.C., occupying the Capitol building, occupying the White House and the Federal Reserve. That's where they ought to be focusing their anger, not at free markets, not at capitalism. That's their only hope at salvation.
Well, I tell people the difference between the Tea Party and the Occupy Wall Street movement is at the end of the Tea Party, we would pick up our signs, pick up our trash, go home and take a bath, and on Monday we'd go to work. And so, the bathing and the going to work part, I think, are foreign to the Occupy Wall Street movement.
Also, the Tea Parties were carrying copies of the Constitution. A lot of the people at the Occupy Wall Streets got their copies of the Communist Manifesto.
If they're lucky, they really probably just have mom and dad's credit card in their back pocket, so they can buy either another Apple phone or designer clothes. And
it's interesting. They seem to hate capitalism, but they got nothing against Apple Computer. That's a real example of capitalism. When they're criticizing Wall Street and the banks, that's crony capitalism. They're actually criticizing, the opposite of what they're protesting.
Well, it's kind of something that's important for us to correct, though, because if they think that the bank bailouts and all of that went on, if they think that is capitalism, it's a problem for us, because then we're losing those people. It's something that if we don't get the argument right, just kind of with the idea on the banking failures, people said that was capitalism, so they said we need to regulate capitalism more, when in fact you're right, it was already sort of a crony form of capitalism and a regulated form of capitalism that had more to do with the government dispensing favors to friends. Yeah,
history is full of examples of governments interfering with capitalism, creating a problem, and then blaming the problem on capitalism and using it as an excuse to grow government. I've mentioned it all the time that unfortunately China is giving communism a good name because they're not really communist, and we're giving capitalism a bad name because we're not really capitalistic.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting paradox.
Yeah, and now if we could just get some of the Occupy Wall Streeters, there's some Rand Paul fans among the Occupy Wall Street crowd. I had one on my show just the other day. But if we could get them to understand that in some cases a lot of their sympathies and goals and objectives really align with the Tea Party, maybe we can merge that into a real force to be reckoned with.
Right. I think they've got to get beyond sort of the let's go get the wealth and the rich people, and also simplistic ideas like let's just eliminate all debt forever. Things like that just aren't really constructive or getting us anywhere.
Well, they also forget who's on the other side of that debt. If you're saying let's get rid of all the debt, well, let's get rid of all the assets. Let's bankrupt all the banks, all the insurance companies, all the pension funds. I mean, how are they going to get jobs if there's no more wealth to supply those jobs? So it's very simplistic. They're just not thinking it through. But, hey, Ren, I understand you got to run. I really appreciate you stopping by. Good luck with getting this bill through the Senate, and I appreciate all that you're doing and look forward to having you back on the show again.
Thanks a lot, Peter.
This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. We will be back, so stick around. And I am back. This is Peter Schiff back here at SchiffRadio.com. We'll take a few calls, and then we'll be back at the top of the next hour with Karen Kwintowski, candidate for Congress on the Republican side. She's going to be challenging an incumbent Republican House member. Meantime, let's go to the phones. First up is John in San Diego, California. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, Peter. Thanks for having me. So I've been kind of buying into this whole idea that a free market could probably determine interest rates better than some guys in a boardroom. But I was wondering if you think it's a viable solution to go back to kind of like the 19th century when we had wildcat banks and they would emit their own bills of credit. Would that be viable in today's world economy? And
sure, I think it would be even more workable today than it was back then. You know, one of the problems back then with banks issuing their own note currency, and of course all the currency was backed by gold, one of the problems was if you were in California and you had a banknote drawn on a bank from Boston, how would the person in California know if it was any good? What if they did, how do they know if the bank is legit? How do they know if the funds are there? I mean, by the time they get somebody, in a train, or maybe it was even before the train, someone on a covered wagon to get back there. So it was difficult. But today with computers, automation, internet, telephones, it's much easier to be able to verify the authenticity of a banknote. So I think it would be fine. I think if we went back to the system from the 19th century, it would be an improvement. Now, of course, we can even improve on that. That doesn't mean that was the best way to do it, but it's certainly better than the way we're doing it right now, where we have a central bank issuing irredeemable fiat currency, where we have nothing but inflation, and we have government bureaucrats picking interest rates out of a hat for political reasons rather than having the market setting rates for economic reasons. We end up getting the booms and the busts. We get the housing bubbles and the stock market bubbles, and all these problems are the result of the current monetary system. We can solve those problems if we got rid of this system.
Got you. And I just want to know if you think if we went to a currency that's gold-backed, would we run into a problem where there's not I don't know much about gold mining, but where the supply of gold isn't tracking population growth and wealth?
No, I mean, it's been very consistent that gold supplies grow by maybe 1.5% a year, and that works. And remember, when the Founding Fathers put us on a gold standard, it's not that they didn't have a choice of another type of monetary standard. We could have adopted or been on a fiat monetary system back at the birth of our nation. It wasn't as if it hadn't been tried in the past and that people didn't know about it. The reason we're on a gold standard and not the type of system we have today is because the Founding Fathers knew that what we have now wasn't any good, that it wouldn't work, that it was inconsistent with liberty and freedom and limited government and everything the Founding Fathers believed in. So it was because they understood money and economics that they put us on a gold standard. And the reason we're not on a gold standard today is probably most people in Congress don't understand economics, or if they do, they're more interested in big government than a prosperous economy, and they know that big government and a gold standard are inconsistent. That's one of the reasons the Founding Fathers put us on a gold standard, because it would keep government power in check. But, the government didn't want it because the government didn't want its power checked. The government wanted to grow power, and it's been able to do that dramatically off the gold standard to the detriment of the American economy and, American citizens. But anyway, thank you for your call. Next up is Chris in Vancouver. Chris, welcome to the show.
Oh, hey, Peter. Thanks for taking my call. It's nice to talk to you.
Thanks for calling.
It's, I guess, first of all, I got to say thanks. I started listening to you during Wall Street Unspun, probably maybe caught clips on the Glenn Beck show before, and in those days I was a waiter, broke, and kind of you freaked me out enough to the point that I'm IR manager for a couple of mining companies now.
Oh, good.
With good diversity and stock options, and so you scared the hell out of me and got me in a way better position. So thanks.
Good.
And in fact, I'll see you in New Orleans at the end of the month.
Okay, yes, at the investment conference down there. Looking forward to it. What's your question?
I've heard people ask before about, how you figure Canada is positioned based on being a resource economy and so on. But I'm having trouble squaring that with the degree to which we rely on the U.S., and the U.S. is going off a cliff. So how do we, there's other...
Well, I don't think Canada relies necessarily on the U.S. Canada trades with the U.S., and I think trade with the U.S. will be diminished, but I do think that a lot of the goods that Canada is currently exporting to America will simply be exported to other nations instead, because as the dollar loses value, other currencies will gain value. So I think, net Canada is still going to come out all right, and I think they're going to be able to import more stuff from America more efficiently because their currency, the Canadian dollar, I believe, is going to gain a lot of ground against the U.S. dollar, and that, I think, will help the Canadian economy, not hurt it. Anyway, hey, thanks for the call. We are running out of time for this segment. We'll be right back for the second hour of the Peter Schiff Show with my guest, potential Congresswoman Karen Kwintowski. So stick around. This is Peter Schiff. Hour 2 of the Peter Schiff Show is underway, and joining me now is Karen Kwintowski, who is a Republican candidate for the House of Representatives in Virginia's 6th District. She is retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, a former Pentagon official, also worked for the National Security Agency stationed in Europe. She's got a M.A. from Harvard. She's also got a Ph.D. She's authored 2 books on U.S. foreign policy toward Africa. She's been doing a lot of writing over there at LouRockwell.com. She's also hosted a radio show. She's taught at a university level. Karen, I think you're overqualified. Why do you want to go to Congress?
Well, we're tired of our incumbent. We have an incumbent Republican, Bob Goodlatte, there for the 6th District of Virginia. He's been there for almost 10 terms now, and he's a rhino. And so
that sounds like a good reason to get rid of him. 20 years in the House.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And so we're challenging him in his Republican primary. So that's going to come up here in June. And that's the plan. We are in a very right-thinking, conservative district. People here, even our Democrats, are very conservative. And so what happens is he doesn't get a lot of opposition from the Democrats. It's considered a safe from a two-party political thing. It's a safe job for him. But he is not conservative. He is a regulator. He likes subsidies, listens to the last guy that talked to him, which is usually a lobbyist, and, not very conservative. He voted.
Yeah, a lot of times these rhinos are doing more damage than the Democrats because they're keeping that seat out of the hands of somebody who might actually use it to do good instead of cooperating with the enemy.
Yeah, absolutely true. And I went to a Young Americans for Liberty class, and the guy at the end of the class explained to us why you really don't want to vote for the lesser evil. A lot of times they say, well, it's a lesser evil. A lot of people held their nose and voted for McCain if they were Republican last time because they say, well, it's a lesser evil. And that's not true at all. These guys who pose as conservatives but are not are extremely dangerous to this country, really. We need conservatism.
Is there anybody else? So you're going to be in a primary election. Is there anybody else challenging him, or is it just going to be the two of you duking it out?
most of it is the two of us duking it out. Libertarians, I haven't named anybody yet. There was one independent who has decided not to run, and there is a Democrat, and it's really funny because he's an FDR Keynesian, and he's very proud of it. He goes around talking about FDR, and he gets booed off the stage here, thank God. So I don't know how his campaign will go, but
right, but he's not going to be in your primary. He's maybe going to run for the general election, right? But right now, your first election is to try to beat out this incumbent, which is not easy to do in the primary, right?
No, not at all. But I'll tell you this, he's already responding to us. He is using the word liberty. This is a Patriot Act supporter from the day one. Never read the thing, but voted repeatedly to uphold all parts of the Patriot Act. He loves that, and yet he talks liberty once we entered the race. And I have to tell you this, you're going to get a kick out of it. He was down in a small town in our district a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned the Mises Institute. And I know.
Does he know who Mises is?
Anything about that?
Yeah. So first, let me ask you, first off about foreign policy with your background in the military, at the Pentagon, at the NSA. So where do you stand on the foreign policy issue? Are you kind of a Ron Paul guy, thinking that we got to end all these foreign entanglements and all these wars, or are you a more traditional conservative that says, we need more military spending?
No, I'm definitely on Ron Paul's camp, and he has it absolutely right, as he explained in the debate just yesterday. We need defense. But most of what we spend our military money on is not defense at all, and he made the points really well, and I totally agree with it. And I actually think most Americans do too. Here in the 6th, we're not wealthy, and we have lots and lots of families who have sons and daughters in the military, some in the Guard and some in the Army, Marines, Navy, all that. And their sons and daughters have come back from these long wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And they've opened the family's eyes and their neighbors and relatives' eyes to what really is passing for defense, and it has nothing to do with defense, and it needs to be stopped. So yeah, I definitely am of the Ron Paul camp.
Well, good. We're going to need more people like that in Congress, because Ron Paul's not going to be there next time. If he's not president, he's retired. So we need to fill his seat or replace that seat.
Yeah, I have to tell you, when my military career in the Air Force, I spent about 5 years before I went to the Pentagon working in military acquisition, and what I saw there, and this was, I was really a Republican, not libertarian-minded. I was just a traditional Goldwater Republican at that time. Probably I still am, but watching how the military spends money, it's insane, and it makes no sense. It supports everything we know today about when the government spends money, what it really means.
Because it's the government. That's why, conservatives have faith in the military, but they understand that the post office doesn't work, that Amtrak doesn't work. Well, it's the same concept. I mean, picture the militaries walking around in postal uniforms. That's what we got.
That's exactly right, and it's a sad thing, but it's true. Yeah, it's sad. I think people are waking up to it, though.
Yeah, I mean, and it's, we need a strong defense, but then the Republicans use that concept to hide all this pork barrel spending and running it through the Defense Department. It's the same way the left says we need education, and then they use that to justify throwing all this money down a rat hole through the Department of Education. You can be pro-education and still want to get rid of the Department of Education, and you can be pro-defense and still want to cut the defense budget.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it has to be done. We don't have money in this country to keep spending like we've been spending, and I know you've been saying that for a long time, and we know this, but I think increasingly people are waking up to it. It just can't continue, and hard decisions have to be made. And this is another reason I'm running, because these guys who have been up there, many of them Republicans, the rhinos in particular, they talk, when they come back home, they talk about, we're going to make cuts. But when they go back there and vote, they vote to spend more money. They pork barrel, they earmark, they lobby, they trade their values and principles so that they can get positions on committees. And this has to stop. It's very frustrating.
Well, is the incumbent, his name is Goodlatte? Is that how to pronounce it?
No.
Goodlatte?
Goodlatte is how he goes. Yes, we call him Goodlatte sometimes, but yeah.
So how did he vote? Did he vote for the TARP? Did he vote for the stimulus?
He didn't vote for TARP, but he did vote for the Bush bailouts. He voted whenever Bush wanted to spend money, he said yes. And most recently, and this is something that really surprised me because I thought he shot himself in the foot, he voted to increase the debt limit this past summer. He was one of those Republicans that said, "Oh, we'll just borrow another $2 trillion and it'll be all fine." He is he's back home now pushing the balanced budget amendment, which I think is a really well, first off, it's a joke, but second off, it's really just an awful trick to play on people. Oh,
yeah.
You know,
well, it shows. Yeah, he's a. Oh no, he's a. Yeah, it shows that he's a hypocrite because he wants to pretend he's for a balanced budget because he says he's for the amendment, but he actually has the opportunity to vote to balance the budget, and he votes for bigger deficits. But anyway, stick around. We're going to continue this discussion after this break. You're listening to Peter Schiff here on the SchiffRadio.com. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com, speaking with U.S. congressional candidate Karen Katowski, Virginia's 6th District. And, you know, Karen, I used to say this when I ran for Senate in 2010, that this balanced budget amendment is just cover for these politicians to be able to pretend they want a balanced budget but never actually vote to balance one. If your opponent, this incumbent congressman, if he really was in favor of a balanced budget amendment, he doesn't have to wait for it to be passed. He can pretend it was already passed and just vote down every budget that's not balanced.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's. I think the people are catching on here too. People of the response that he's getting as he talks about this is people are pretty impatient, and they're saying, "Why wait? Why should we wait longer and longer? I mean, haven't we been telling you guys to cut your spending, to get your house in order?" And they they don't want to do it. They have a great job. Yeah. They just do whatever they want, and everything goes along.
Basically, what he's saying is, I want a balanced budget, but I'm never going to vote for one unless somebody else forces me to. How about
that's right. Yeah.
So then you can expose him for a hypocrite and a liar on that issue alone. That he does not. He opposes a balanced budget. He doesn't want one.
Yeah, he wants to vote more money, more printed money, more borrowed money. He likes that. Now, I will say this for him. He eventually, he was like 120th or whatever signatory to Ron Paul's Audit the Fed legislation that's been floating around. He did sign on to that after he saw so many other people do it that were conservative. But he's not a believer in any of the things that real conservatives believe in. And
now, is he trying to cozy up to the Tea Party?
Well, he tries, but they won't have much to do with him, which is good. And one thing about having a 20-year record is we know what he's about. And so when he says stuff, we actually know how he votes. And this is why he is actually quite vulnerable, and it's why we chose to go ahead and take him out in his primary. And it can be done, and we're doing it. So.
Yeah, plus I like it when you have these, 20-year incumbents. They're going to talk about all the great things they're going to do if you reelect them. Well, you've been there for 20 years. Why haven't you done it already?
That's exactly right. And actually, there was something floating around when it comes to a balanced budget, an old bit of legislation from Jimmy Carter's day when he was trying to do something. He passed legislation relating to some Bretton Woods thing. And in it actually states that Congress will not spend more than it has in its coffers and it takes in. And in the language of that, one of the conservative folks were emailing this around, but I checked it out, actually, the real document. And the language is very clear, and it almost sounds like a balanced budget amendment language, and yet it's been going on since, this has been in the books, and they ignore the laws. The Congress has no intention of saving. We just have to get different congressmen up there, congresswomen
well, absolutely.
or whatever.
So what are your key issues? I know everybody's talking about jobs and the economy. What are your bullet points that you're leading with on the economy and jobs?
Well, my thing is less government, more prosperity, and picked up a little bit of that from, obviously, Ron Paul and the way he looks at things. When government spends money, as you well know and as you've educated so many people on, it sucks the life out of the economy. It doesn't create jobs, doesn't create productivity, it just makes us more sick. And so I'm really hammering on less government spending, less government control, and that would hit the regulatory side of things, and smaller government, less taxes. So all of those things together contribute to the lifeblood of the economy, the strength and vitality of our economy.
Right.
And
that's the argument we need to make, is to show that it's not the government that's going to solve the problems, that the government is the problem, And the more we get government involved, the bigger the problem's going to get. And that the solution is to get rid of all this government so that we can restore our prosperity, restore economic growth and job creation. So how have you, do you have a political infrastructure built out yet? You have a campaign staff, volunteers? How's it going?
Have a campaign staff. We have some volunteers. We have lots and lots of people that support us both in the 6th District. A lot of them are Tea Party types. Of course, independents, libertarians, and thinking conservatives, thinking Republicans who are really, it's dawning on them that 20 years of the same is he's not going to change, and they're getting that. So that part's happening. I wanted to mention that this is just a pet peeve of mine, kind of this constant discussion of jobs, and my incumbent does it. Certainly, President Obama constantly talks about jobs and creating jobs. And they don't seem to understand what we want to create is productivity and prosperity, people actually producing things that people need. And that never, ever comes from a government-created position.
I know. The government, Obama, confuses jobs with work. We don't want to work. We'd rather retire. We'd rather not have to work because we're so productive that we work because we want things. And so if we have jobs that don't produce more stuff, then it's no good. In fact, when you create more government jobs, you diminish the economy's ability to produce stuff, so you have more work, but you have a lower standard of living because the workers produce less.
That's exactly right. And I'll tell you, as I was looking at his jobs plan, this is Obama's, and of course the Republicans have a similar jobs plan. It's a shame, but the rhinos are not far removed from Obama in most things, and that's really sad to me. But one of the things you look at when you see the legislation that's coming out, and this includes IP protection, a whole bunch of things that are being pushed out of Washington, is it's aimed at making things easier for government, not
absolutely.
For the people.
Well, you sound like you're a great candidate. You got a good background. I think you might have a good shot in this thing if you can get some support, raise some money. What's your website if any of my audience wants to go there and check it out and maybe give you a little money?
Sure enough, it's KarenK4Congress.com. Karen K for Congress with the FOR instead of the number. KarenK4Congress.com. We're on Facebook too, and we definitely need the support. We need the ideas. The money too is fine. We'll take that, especially now that we know it's a primary. We're pretty sure it's going to be a primary rather than a convention. So we're going to get out there and put the word out. And
well, that's good. You get to bypass the party establishment and take your case directly to the rank and file Republican voters. You got any other endorsements of your candidacy? Any high profile endorsements? Or?
Not yet. We don't have any high profile endorsements yet. We absolutely tried to get Ron Paul, but as a sitting congressman, his office said, it's a policy, unwritten policy, that they don't endorse against other sitting Republicans, even if those Republicans are toxic. So.
Oh, really? That must be like a club kind of thing where they don't want to. They take a mutual pact not to hurt one another. It's kind of this club of the incumbents, and I think it almost goes both ways. I think that they all protect each other's backs, even the Democrats and the Republicans, because they don't want. They don't want to let anybody else into the club. But hopefully you get in there. Hey, you can have my endorsement for whatever it's worth.
Well, I will. I appreciate that greatly, and I love it because I have to say this, Peter, before we're done. I absolutely loved your performance, your work in the Congress there in September 13th, I think it was, when you educated them on that panel. You were by far the most understandable and smartest guy up there, and I'm really hoping it had an impact. I hope these guys listened to what you say and understood what you were saying.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to be going up there to Congress, I think, again, sometime soon. Ron Paul's got something where he educates other congressmen. I think I'm going to be speaking. I don't know if it's going to be the congressmen or their aides that I'm going to be talking to, but hopefully I'm going to be speaking to quite a few people there that have some influence on the policies that are coming out of Washington, because it's killing the country. We need to get those guys out of there and replace them with people like you that understand economics and understand that the source of our prosperity is not going to come from Washington. It's going to come from everybody else. And the key is to diminish the power and influence of Washington by getting rid of a lot of the taxes and regulations. Anyway, hey, Karen, I wish you a lot of luck. Thank you for running. Hopefully we'll have you on the show again, maybe when you are the Republican nominee. But anyway, everybody else, stick around. We've got another half hour coming up with the Peter Schiff Show here at SchiffRadio.com. And this is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. I was speaking about jobs before the break and the difference between jobs and work, or government make jobs and private sector jobs. And so I wanted to play a little bit of a sound from the Reverend Sharpton, Al Sharpton, who was on MSNBC the other day speaking about Eric Cantor's comments that government doesn't create jobs. And, of course, this sent him off, in a real tizzy here because, of course, according to Reverend Sharpton, the government is the best job creator. But anyway, here is a little bit of this rant. It's cut number 13.
Washington doesn't create jobs, Richard, and the public understands it. And the stimulus program, and I don't have enough time left in this segment to go back and show the graph of when the stimulus was there, how unemployment went down. But what is Eric talking about? Does he live in a parallel universe, Richard? Of course Washington can create jobs and protect jobs.
See, according to the Reverend, it's easy to create jobs. Well, where do they come from? How does Washington create jobs? And if they can create jobs, then why don't they just create jobs for everybody? Right? Why is there ever any unemployment? If the government can simply create jobs out of thin air, the way it creates money out of thin air, then what's the problem? The person that lives in the parallel universe is the Reverend Al Sharpton. He lives in a fantasy land of his own creation where the government has magic powers and it could just create jobs. Now, I will agree that the government can create jobs as long as you're not talking about productive jobs, which means what the government can create is work. Yes, the government can assign people all the jobs that they want. The government can have people washing the rocks in the ocean, right? But what good is that going to be? Is the government going to create productive jobs? Did the Soviet Union create productive jobs? Is Fidel Castro creating productive jobs? No, because governments don't create productive jobs. It's the free market. It's the private sector. You're looking at all these riots over there in Greece. Why is the Greek economy in so much trouble? Because 1 out of 5 people in Greece works for the Greek government. That means all these people are not producing anything. That is the problem with the Greek economy, is too many people are pretending to work by having government jobs, and not enough people are actually working in the private sector. So yes, Al Sharpton, the government can create work and call them jobs, but only at the expense of destroying our productivity and making everybody worse off, including the people who are on the government payroll, but of course especially the people who are picking up the tab for the people who are on the government payroll. Anyway, let me take a break and go back to the phones. We've got John calling from West Palm Beach, Florida, who's been patient, who's been on hold for some time. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, Peter, how you doing?
Good.
Glad you get me on here this morning. I wanted to talk to you about a few things, and, I don't really have too much of a political background. I'm a recent graduate from college, and I made a trip back to my alma mater this weekend. And I was just talking to some friends and everything about the Occupy Wall Street, Ron Paul, the next candidates coming up in the next election. And I came to find out that unless you're really doing, online research, listening to shows like yours online, and outsourcing from the mainstream media, the society isn't really aware of what's taking place. Now, I'm not saying that everything that was Occupy Wall Street necessarily the request there, the certain organizations are requesting everything is going to happen, or is going to create a solution. I think that's something that needs to be determined with the society, and I believe that with the mainstream networks actually feeding in society that information, that will be expressed. My question to you is...
I'm going down there myself. In fact, I was going to go to the heart of the Occupy Wall Street protest today, but it's raining, so I'm going to hold off and do that tomorrow. I'm in Manhattan both today and tomorrow. I've got some speaking engagements down there and things that I'm doing. So I was planning on stopping by and speaking directly with a lot of the Occupy Wall Street protesters to see if I can engage them in a dialogue and maybe try to help educate them to direct their rage and their anger in the proper direction. Not to protest the capitalist system, which is their only hope, and instead to protest the government that is basically diminishing those hopes by interfering in that system.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to go back to, and like I said, I have little knowledge about the political system. I have a basic understanding of it, but in terms of everything that's been taking place, it's pretty much a snowstorm for me. But, if you look at things such as just in terms of the Federal Reserve Bank and everything, and the Federal Reserve, what it's made up of, and our Secretary of Treasury in those key positions, if you look at the history of it, the Bush administration, I'm not really exactly sure who Obama has in each position, but most of those employees are former Wall Street executives. So it's almost like they're paving.
Yeah, well, there definitely is a revolving door when it comes to Washington and Wall Street through the Department of Treasury, and so they're basically scratching each other's back, and that has to stop, because a lot of this policy is now being written specifically to benefit the former employers or future employers of the people who are working in Washington. And the way to attack that is to take away the power from Washington so that they don't have all the influence to peddle to the highest bidder. That is the problem. We give the government a lot of power, and that creates the lobbyists, because people want that power to be used for their own benefit and to the detriment of somebody else. So the source is the government power. The problem is in Washington. You can't blame private interests for wanting to use that power, or in many cases to just try to protect themselves from that power being used against them. The real evil is the source. You've got to cut the head of the snake off, and that's the way to kill the problem. Anyway, thanks for your call. Thanks for your patience. Next up is Charles calling from New York City. Charles, welcome to the show.
Hey, Peter, thank you for having me. Depending on how much time you'll give me now, I have three questions ideally. The first question is an investment question. And I don't know if you're familiar with Francois Trahan, but he recently came out with a book called The Era of Uncertainty, which I read a couple times already, talking about the globalization of today's world and how leading...
Yeah, I'm not familiar with him, but what is your investment question?
Sure. My investment question is, it seems to be that leading economic indicators such as the ISM index and prices paid, the prices paid indices and the PMI have been declining recently, which I have learned is kind of goes in tandem with kind of an early expansion in the economy in favor of consumer discretionary stocks. And I wanted to know, I know your thoughts about the economy as a whole.
Yeah, I don't think the economy is expanding at all. I think that the debt is expanding. I think the economy is being propped up by cheap money and excess spending and borrowing. But I don't think the U.S. economy is even capable of a genuine recovery given the constraints that are upon it right now. So I think the best we can do is phony recoveries. But ultimately, that just makes the situation worse. So, I think you want to base your investment strategy on that reality.
Right, I understand. Okay, and in terms of government deregulation, which I totally am in favor of and agree with, my question is, wasn't it really back really starting in the early 90s, ever since Clinton was president, wasn't it government deregulation that helped cause the crisis?
No, I mean, there are a lot more regulations today than there were when Bill Clinton came into office. Even before Dodd-Frank, right, before the financial crisis happened, the sheer volume of rules and regulations that had been added to the economy was enormous, particularly as it applied to the financial industry, but, of course, other sectors as well. Now, were there some regulations that were repealed? Yes, there were. But the number of rules and regulations that were repealed was dwarfed by the number of new rules and regulations that were added. So we never had deregulation, but we had some regulation. And the problem is that in some areas where they allowed the banks to take greater risk with government-guaranteed deposits, the problem wasn't that some of those rules were repealed. The problem was that they didn't repeal the regulations that made those rules necessary, which was the concept of government-insured deposits. If the deposits are not government-insured, then we don't need any regulations because the market will regulate them. But the minute the government says, hey, the market, you don't have to regulate these banks anymore because we're going to guarantee all your accounts, in one swoop, the government has removed all of the market regulation that would have kept the banks in line, prevented them from taking too much risk. So once the government made the mistake of doing that, they had to try to correct for that mistake by now regulating the banks instead of the free market. And so we did that. But, of course, bureaucrat regulation is never going to be as efficient as market regulation because the markets is people regulating with their own money. People have skin in the game. People have something to lose, so it's better. But politics, that regulatory regime is easily corrupted because the regulators really don't give a damn because it's not their money at stake. A lot of times it's their reelection, and oftentimes they end up compromising the spirit of the regulations to further their own political aspirations, and the regulators become captivated by the industries that most benefit from regulations that restrict competition and help them increase their profits at the expense of either the economy or a competitor. Anyway, hey, thanks for your calls. We've got another segment coming up, so stick around. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. We'll be right back. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. The final segment of the show is here. You know, I just was pulled up by Video Blog. You know, a while ago I set up a challenge to try to get to 50,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, The Schiff Report. We're getting close, although it's taken longer than I thought. We're at 49,326, so fewer than 700 subscribers away from the 50,000 benchmark. So if you're not currently an official subscriber to my YouTube channel, why not go over there and sign up? And if you know anybody, maybe you can invite some of your friends to be subscribers and get more people on that video blog. You know, also on my Facebook page, we're getting close to 50,000 as well, a little bit further away. I've got about 48,500 Facebook friends. So if you're not a friend of my Facebook page, you know, why not sign up there as well and invite your friends to be friends on my page and see if we can get this message, you know, a little bit more prevalent on social media. So it's my Facebook page and my YouTube channel. See if we can get both those numbers above the 50,000 mark. Hey, before I go back to the phones, I want to play a little bit from Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont on television again with the class warfare rhetoric that is getting more and more intense. Here is Senator Sanders. It's cut number 12.
The other important issue that the demonstrators have been raising is both the moral and economic aspects of a grossly unequal distribution of wealth and income. So when you have the 400 wealthiest people owning more wealth than the bottom half of America, 150 million Americans, you know what? Most Americans will say, that ain't right, that's wrong. We got to address the issue of the rich getting richer and everybody else getting poorer.
So what is the solution? Are we really going to make the poor richer by making the rich poorer? Is redistribution of wealth the answer? According to Bernie Sanders, it is. Let's just take money from the rich. Well, how is that going to grow the economy? In fact, it'll prevent the economy from growing. You know, in a real free market, the rich only get rich if the poor and the middle class get rich in the process. That's how it works. The only way the rich get richer at the expense of the poor or the middle class is if the government is involved. And it's government that enables wealthy people to steal money from the poor or the middle class. It's capitalism that basically says if you want to get rich, you got to earn it. You just can't take money away from the poor and the middle class. You've got to earn their money by improving their lot in life. You've got to give them something, offer them something that they value, that they want to purchase. So that's the way to help the rich people, to help the poor or the middle class. to allow more capitalism, to allow businesses to invest and grow. The reason for these wealth disparities, if they're bigger than they normally would be, the reason the poor and the middle class are suffering is because of all the social programs and taxes and regulations that people like Bernie Sanders have been voting for all these years. That is the problem. The way to what we need to do is get Bernie Sanders out of the U.S. Senate and anybody who thinks like him. Because if we simply redistribute the wealth, if we simply raise taxes, then all we're going to do is further diminish the standard of living of the very people that Senator Sanders is hoping to benefit. Anyway, let me go back to the phone calls. We've got Jeremy on the line calling from Manhattan. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Peter. That was very well said. I hope you can spread some of that down at Occupy Wall Street. My question is, if the point of investing is to outpace or at least keep up with the rate of inflation, how can you justify investing in anything other than precious metals right now? Because if you look at, the real inflation numbers, I mean, they're anywhere between 6 and 8%, I'd say. And even if you look at some of the global asset allocation portfolios, they're barely yielding that. So,
yeah, well, it's hard to say that you should, have everything in one thing. I mean, we know, that gold has done very well over the past 10 years, and in general, people would have been better off just owning gold as opposed to owning stocks or bonds. But that doesn't mean that that's going to be exactly the same over the coming 10 years. I agree with you that the case for investing or owning gold is very compelling, and owning silver for that matter. But I still think that there is a strong case to be made for owning other assets as well, for owning select foreign stocks, good dividend payers in other countries, for keeping some money on the sidelines, having some money in foreign government bonds. There is a case to be made, I think, a strong case for diversification. We don't know for sure what the future is going to be. We know that gold is not paying a dividend. And, I do believe that there is a lot of potential for growth in a lot of these emerging markets. Because remember, gold doesn't grow. It just sits there. It does preserve wealth, and I think it is undervalued. But over the long run, I don't think people are going to get as wealthy holding gold as they will holding more productive assets. So the key is to have a balanced portfolio. And, if we do get a big decline in the stock market again, then you could use some of your gold to take advantage of the bargains. But if we don't, if we get a big increase in global stock markets, there's a pretty good chance that a lot of the markets are going to outperform, just gold bullion.
Yeah. Well, I very much agree with that. In fact, I find it funny that a lot of these talking heads on TV that try to rip apart the gold bugs. I own a lot of gold and silver, and I'll be the first to admit to anyone that you can't make money in it. I'm not looking to make money. All I am is looking to preserve. Well,
you're looking to preserve wealth, and you preserve wealth a lot better in gold. And again, I don't compare gold to stocks. I think, to use the Herman Cain analogy, it's apples and oranges. I compare gold to dollars. I compare gold to euros or gold to yen. That's a better comparison. So if people don't want to invest, if they want to just preserve and maintain liquidity, I think gold is a superior way to do it than cash. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have any cash because, for short, immediate needs, I mean, you want to have some cash. But longer-term liquidity should be held in gold, I believe. And, yes, if you want to invest your money rather than just holding it in money or a money substitute, then you can buy stocks or something else. But, when people say, yeah, the stock market has beat gold, well, so what? That's apples and oranges.
Nominally, anyway. But I understand the principles, but I think putting into practice is a lot harder. I find it hard to. I mean, how do you diversify yourself?
Well, you do. I mean, look, do you have an account with Euro Pacific Capital?
I'm working towards my minimum, so not yet.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have other vehicles that accommodate lower investments. I'm just not allowed to mention them specifically on this show. But if you go online, it's not too hard to figure out what they are. And so we certainly can accommodate you. Anyway, hey, thank you for calling up. I apologize for the people still on hold who didn't get through. We will have an opportunity tomorrow. We'll be taking more calls. When we come back, we'll have another full 2 hours of the Peter Schiff Show. here at SchiffRadio.com, the gold standard in talk radio. Bye for now.